So my presentation is called Sustainable Information Management. However, we've got 15 minutes, so it's really about the opportunities you can have for connecting information management strategies to use sustainability principles in general. Now, Architype is an architectural team of about 100 people, so mostly architects, also engineers, information managers, researchers working across offices in London, Hereford, and Edinburgh. So we partner with larger institutions to try to influence government policies, mostly in sustainable design. Now, we've won awards. We've had 3 AJ 100 Sustainable Practice of the Year award, and I have been here working as an information manager for a while. However, why should you watch this presentation? In the UK in particular, the government has made efforts to address both sustainability and information management goals for a long time now. So we have funding initiatives such as the Schools for the Futures. It's just a great time to think about how these ideas support each other. And we can create more integrated systems that are manageable and useful for all of us. The overall goals of this presentation that you should look at is we're currently in a climate emergency. There are no more excuses. Buildings do need to be demonstrably net zero from now on. Good IM can help with this. And then you gather the data, you learn the lessons, and Architype have been doing this, and we've come to a few conclusions that maybe can help. Now, in sustainability and in IM, I think it's useful to kind of remember why we're doing this in the first place, because in construction, we kind of understand. But the wider picture is the golden thread. It's already been mentioned today. Ultimately, Grenfell has not been that far away. Constructions are getting more and more complicated. If we don't focus on how information is being passed on, if we don't know where it comes from and where it goes, we run greater risks as in the whole industry. There's also usable information. We produce so much information in construction, and at the end of the day, it needs to be managed and it needs to be passed forwards for us to learn from it, and it's getting harder as we go. So information management helps with that. It has so much more potential to help in our other efforts. For sustainability, we can pinpoint data requirements that are organized and tracked to provide best results. For instance, real-time monitoring, performance evaluations in buildings. You can do predictive modeling for energy consumption, environmental impact of buildings. You can ultimately allocate your resources better, get some data-driven insights, but that's only if you actually manage to gather all of the data you've been producing for so long. Now, that was for information management. We can also ask why sustainability in general. Now, in the UK, England's housing strategies would blow our entire carbon budget. Even here, the climate is showing signs of breakdown, so there are constantly breaking weather records, and there is an ongoing energy crisis. So we know we need to do better. But there are 30 different definitions of net zero. There are huge assumptions. There are huge misconceptions about how offsetting works. Now, non-domestic buildings often use 2 to 10% the amount of energy they were designed to, as illustrated by the Innovate UK research in 2016. Now, if this was a car, you're claiming it'll do 50 mpg, but you're doing 5. There would be outrage, and it is shocking. So what do I actually mean by sustainability? And that is a tricky one. It means many things to many people. Some of my previous slides have suggested this. There are different metrics, there are different strategies, you're doing different things. Regardless of what you are doing, all of your strategies need information, quantitative, qualitative, and while there are different metrics, many will have a range of elements in common, such as improving interior air quality, a more sustainable way of sourcing materials, waste reduction. Now, there won't be a solution to fit all paradigms. However, you will have project priorities that you can use to assess what you're doing. This presentation, because of the experience in Architype, I mostly be referencing passive house requirements, but you can apply these to other sustainability efforts. A few examples of sustainability principles you can apply: how to measure energy efficiency, how to make sure you're achieving your green building standards, doing material selection and life cycle assessment using carbon footprint tools such as Ecolab, or doing qualitative assessments. What's the building doing? What will it do in 6 months' time or a year's time? How is it actually working? I'll be doing this case study presentation, looking at what Architype has done and how it's integrated a few of the information management strategies in our own buildings. So I thought I'd start with the Maybury Primary School. It is a school in Edinburgh, about 6,000 square meters, 630 pupils, has a nursery, it has a health center. It is a LEAP-funded building, which means ISO 19650 standards, and following the Scottish Futures Trust templates for information management. So the project information requirements and DIR, those templates. For this, we did great work with the Scottish Futures Trust, as previously mentioned, as well as Digital Gorilla, Holmes Miller, and the City of Edinburgh Council, to develop an exemplar for the project information requirement. This basically tells you what the client needs in terms of broad information categories and how they're planning on using it, when they need that information to come in. Now, the detail we've kept low. It was an exemplar, it's meant to be used on all of the buildings. So you'll see tiny little Excel thing there. It just goes broadly into, you need to mention acoustic requirements, you need to mention energy standards. You can build on this. This is a first pass, but you also need to be able to apply this if you're ever changing standards in the futures. Now looking back, the key lessons learned was the program implications for introducing any of this, passive house information managers and information management. They just need to be made clearer at the beginning. And then another point that will grow with time is if you're doing all of these things, if you're producing new information in new ways, you need to be able to track it. So you need to be able to pinpoint where that information has been placed at the end of the day. For the first point, explaining when you need things and why you need them, we've also worked with the Passive House Trust and the Scottish Futures Trust for this document, the Passive House Overlay to the RABA Plan of Work. This basically tells you what info you need when you need it. Going forward, the idea would be to take this, link it into the project information requirements, and incorporate it in the project timeline so people know what they're working towards. And ultimately, the point of this is to reduce risk to the client, reduce risk to the design team, and get your sustainable building at the end of it. Going forward, actually, from the project information requirement, you have the asset information requirements. Now, this is where you put all your detailed data requirements. What are you actually maintaining? What do you care about at the end of this project as a client? All the data comes straight from the Revit models, although there is also an IFC output. And there were two considerations we used when developing this with the client. You need to keep it light, so you don't get information you don't need, because there's enough information produced at the end of the day. But if there is something you do need, this is where you mention it. If you do, people can plan ahead, and you get better quality data at the end of the day. Now, at the end of the process, we got some very rich data entities that could easily, relatively speaking, be developed into a light digital twin. You can use these to record information of how the school functions. So all the information and sustainability I was talking of beforehand, room temp, heat loss areas, these can all go into set locations into the model, and they can be a more user-friendly way of explaining what you've done and recording and analyzing what has gone from there. So the screenshot is a test we were doing to integrate readings into the 3D model. And ultimately, this links all the things you've been working on beforehand into a cohesive presentation so other people can look at it and understand it. And my point in all of this is we can already do all of these things. There's so much software there that we are already using. However, so you've gathered the high quality data, you have put it into the software. I think the next step into all of this is about taking it and making it more widely visible and more useful for both the client and the end users, which is what we are ultimately trying to do with all of this. On Maybury, for instance, big screen at the main entrance showing how the building performs. Monitors in island playstations so children can see what the internal air quality is in the rooms themselves, just explaining what we are looking at in a more cohesive way. Now, the challenges and solutions for information management and for sustainability at the end of the day, they're widely similar. So firstly, you've produced all of the information, and then stage 6 comes up, it's handover, you give it all to the client. What happens to it afterwards? It goes into storage for 12 years. How is it going to come out? No one really knows. So the problem with data is it needs to be renewed and maintained, it needs to be used, otherwise there's really no telling what's going to come out of it in 10 years' time. Relating to that, you need to be able to access it in the next project, and you need to be able to access it early, so the client needs to know where it's stored, where it's required next, and how to move it from one place to the other. Same in sustainability. You share this information between projects, so you're able to learn the lessons, and the data must highlight these issues. That's the general idea around it. Now, in our experience, all these practices, all best practices, have been case-specific because it depends on client experience, team experience, and buy-in. So there are a lot of factors in communicating what you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it. However, regardless of the conclusion of the communication is, you need to make early decisions as they will be the most impactful at the end of the day, and you need to build the integrated workflows to kind of move the information around as the project progresses and after it ends. Now, just a few closing remarks. If there are a few things I would like to take away from the presentation today, buildings have to be sustainable, proper information management can help, and it can be done now with the tools we already have. So, thank you very much for listening. Finished a bit early.